This is the fight of the century, and no, I'm not talking about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I'm talking about the buttery smooth, arcadey Diablo-like for single dads to play between changing diapers and touching grass, versus the more methodical Souls-like spreadsheet simulator for people that spend too much time in their basement and have an unhealthy relationship with their hand. Both games can hold their own in the ARPG space, and I intend to play and make content for both of them. But Diablo 4 comes with training wheels that allow the average player to follow clues towards a certain conclusion, which is great if you can't be bothered to get a PhD in theory crafting. PoE 2, on the other hand, is like filing your taxes while solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. It's gonna take a lot of time, but that's half the fun. Now, before I break down the comparisons, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If you do all three, I'm going to be giving somebody in the comments an early access code for PoE 2. That's worth $30. And I'm going to drop a Battle Pass code for this season for Diablo 4. So make sure you comment with which game you like more so I can give you the correct code. So let's do some comparisons. The Paragon boards in Diablo 4 are the closest thing to the passive tree in PoE 2. But in D4, your Paragon boards are limited to your class. They mostly just contain basic stats that don't change your build much, and they become very cookie cutter to an experienced player. The PoE 2 passive tree is massive. It has over 1,500 nodes, and all of the classes share this tree, which is a wild option for mixing and matching. And the notables offer passives that heavily change your build, not to mention keystones, which alter your build significantly. Following along the same lines, Diablo 4 keeps things contained in the class when it comes to your skill tree. For your skills in Diablo 4, you stick to a pretty structured checklist where you're going down the line and you're choosing the passives that apply to your build. This basically forces most players into going with the exact same things, so you can't get very creative with it, and there's almost always a clear best option. With this comes a simplicity that allows casual players to excel more, but you're likely going to end up doing the same build as everyone else. In Path of Exile 2, you get your skills through gems. There are a ton of gems, and all classes can use each other's gems. In Diablo 4, you might be able to slightly alter a skill through tempering or aspects, but in Path of Exile 2, you can go nuts. For example, to keep it simple, say you're shooting an arrow in Path of Exile. You could use a support gem that splits that into 3. Then you could have another support gem that allows those arrows to pierce an enemy. Then you could use another support gem that allows those arrows to bounce off of walls. You can keep stacking these support gems until you hit your limit and turn a simple skill into something really crazy. Now, I don't really have a Diablo 4 comparison to this, but Path of Exile 2 also has Ascendancies. This basically splits each class into 3 different categories, and these Ascendancies are going to give you bonuses to change your character even further. In fact, because PoE 2 allows you to use any gem you want on any class, these Ascendancies are actually more like the actual classes. And keep in mind that there's 6 classes in early access for PoE 2, and 6 more coming with the actual release. That's 36 total Ascendancies, which is more or less like 36 classes, which is pretty insane. Now, if we were to stop at this point and take a tally, it's pretty clear that PoE 2 is winning. But let's take a look at some of the other aspects of the games, and make sure you stay till the end because I'm saving the most important thing for last. So let's talk about story. When it comes to story and exploration, Diablo 4 has a clear advantage. With its open world nature, it's basically an MMORPG. And of course, Blizzard has the top-notch cinematics that make it all the better. Now, I'm not a big story person, so this doesn't matter that much to me, but I think it's pretty clear-cut which one is better. Moving on to the endgame, I think both of these games actually stand pretty strong on their own. It's a bit subjective because they both have several endgame modes, so it kind of depends on what you like to do. Path of Exile 2 is using an atlas system, which is basically a visualization of the maps from PoE 1. The ability to move where you want and modify the atlas to increase the difficulty and drops is really cool. And I love the fact that there is a progression tree for each different type of content, so you can get more benefits from that type of content by doing that content more. D4 could definitely take some notes in this area, because I'd love to see advantages for Hell Tides from doing more Hell Tides. Now, if we're talking about variety in the endgame, I still think that Diablo 4 actually wins in this department. Because in Diablo 4, you've got Hell Tides, pits, Undercity, world bosses, infernal hordes, nightmare dungeons, a huge overworld map, and things like Whispers objectives. There's even some PvP zones if you're into that kind of thing. But let's be real, one game has been out for a year, had a paid expansion, and the other is just now going into early access, and is supposed to have double the content on actual release. Another big area in ARPGs is crafting. Unlike the original Path of Exile 2 is going to have a different take on itemization. Currency will be more common, and the goal will be to gradually improve your gear and increase its usability by adding more stat lines. My favorite thing that I've seen about it so far is that each different type of endgame content is going to have a different focus when it comes to what you're going to be improving on your gear. For example, you can open up a notable node on a completely different side of the passive tree from where you're at. And that's just opening up even more options for build diversity. Diablo 4 has gotten its itemization to a point that it's actually fairly decent. But the biggest issue for me is that at the end of the day, you're mostly just increasing your stats in a pretty simple way. At best, you're maybe doubling up on an ability or increasing its size or duration slightly. To me, that's not really fun. I really enjoy games like Rounds or Archero or some of the old Starship games where you can get different upgrades, and as you get the upgrades, it's changing the function of your attacks. And PoE does that extremely well. It stops you from having to be the same cookie cutter as everyone else. Of course, there's still going to be meta builds that are better than others, but you could play 1,000 hours and not come across even 10% of the builds. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I did want to mention monetization. I think Diablo 4 and Path of Exile both have fair monetization practices. Diablo 4's box price is a little bit steep, but there's no pay to win and no pay for convenience, which I really respect. Now, Path of Exile 2, on the other hand, has pay for convenience. Now, some people might look down on that, but not only is the game free, but Grinding Your Games has also committed to transferring all of your cosmetics and other purchases from PoE 1 to PoE 2, which shows me that they're not being overly greedy and they're respecting their players and the money they're spending. So I personally don't have an issue with either one of these practices. Finally, the biggest difference in my eyes is bossing. And not necessarily just bossing, but combat mechanics in general. But it's much more prevalent in the boss fights if you watch any PoE 2 videos. Diablo 4 suffers from an issue where when you go into a boss fight, it feels like you're basically fighting a meat sack of HP. The only satisfying aspect to it is when you kill a boss so quickly that you don't have to deal with it. But PoE 2 does have that Souls-like element where you actually have to pay attention to telegraphed attacks, dodge out of the way, block, or use other movement abilities to get out of the way. It's a very important aspect to the game, which makes it much more fun. This was my favorite thing when I played Lost Ark. The combat was amazing, and the boss fights were very good. So what's the result of my comparisons? The clear winner here is Path of Exile 2. The main differences come down to the sheer amount of customization you can do, which leaves theory crafters like myself with an endless supply of fun, and real enemy mechanics that make for fun and skill-based gameplay. But what do you guys think? Which game do you think is better? And did I miss anything important? Comment below and let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I can't wait to stream and make more content for you guys. I'll see you in my next video.